Right, it looks like everyone is back, so we'll go back on the record. And who are you calling as your first witness, Attorney Gill?
Mona Craft.
All right. Is there any way for her to move a little bit closer to the screen so I can see her? I mean, it's okay for you, but I'd like to be able to see her expressions a little bit easier.
We'll see how close we can get.
Okay. Yeah, that's much better. Ms. Kraft, before we begin, I do need to swear you in. If you could raise your right hand, do you solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you will give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you can put your hand down. And could you just state your name and spell it for me, please?
Mona Craft, K-R-A-F-T.
And what is your position with the respondent, the company?
Chief People Officer.
Right, Attorney Gill, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start with your questioning of Ms. Kraft.
Hey, Ms. Craft, you can just look at the screen and I'll come over on the side so she can look at you and look at me at the same time. So you testified that your position is Chief People Officer,
Yes,
and in that position, what are your responsibilities?
I oversee the entire human resource function and payroll.
You're familiar with Ms. Harris, who's filed the complaint today?
I am.
Do you know what Ms. Harris's position was with the company while she was employed?
She was our QA supervisor
Do you know how long she was employed with Nueske?
from January of 2017 to February of 2021.
So approximately 4 years.
Yes,
Are you aware of the basis of the complaint that Ms. Harris filed against the company?
yes, she's alleging we violated her rights under the Family Medical Leave Act.
And do you have an opinion relative to whether or not you engaged in any actions that inhibited the act or that violated the act?
We did not.
Okay. What did you understand the condition that Ms. Harris alleged to qualify for FMLA to be?
That she had back and neck pain and needed to have some elective surgery to alleviate that.
Do you know when the first time the company became aware that Ms. Harris was requesting FMLA?
December of 2020.
Okay. And do you know whether or not the company provided her an application on December 14, 2020?
Yes,
Now, who at Nueske's is responsible for administering FMLA?
Lisa Ryzen.
And Ms. Ryzen is a direct report to yourself?
That's correct.
Now, does Ms. Ryzen work with you in any capacity as it relates to the administration of FMLA?
Lisa will come to me if she has questions regarding any paperwork.
Okay. How long has Ms. Ryzen been employed with the Nueske's?
A little over 5 years.
In regard to Ms. Harris's application for FMLA, do you know whether or not it was approved?
It was.
And was it approved in all capacities?
Yes, it was.
So when you indicate that it's approved in all capacities, this would be related to her physical therapy,
Correct.
her request for her surgery,
Correct.
and any time off needed due to flare-ups.
Correct.
Now, you indicated that the company provided Ms. Harris with documentation or application December 14th. Did the company provide an additional application?
Yes. From what I understand, Ms. Harris did not know where her copy was originally, so she requested another copy, which was provided to her.
Okay. Did Ms. Harris lose the second copy?
From what I understand, yes, and asked for another one, which was provided to her.
So the company provided 3 copies of the application on 3 separate occasions for Ms. Harris.
Correct.
And do you know whether or not the company promptly provided the application upon request?
Yes.
And do you know whether or not those copies were provided in person or via email, or how were they provided to Ms. Harris?
I believe both. I believe originally it was in person and then the others were via email.
Do you know when Ms. Harris submitted the first application for the company to consider for FMLA?
I believe that was January 25th. I would need to look at my notes to verify the date.
Judge, I'm going to grab the book of the exhibits for both Ms. Kraft and myself.
It was actually January 8th that we received a submission from Bellin.
Okay. I'd like you to take a look at what has been marked as Respondents Exhibit 7, specifically starting with page 254. Is page 254 through pages 261, what you understand to be an accurate copy of the application for FMLA?
Yes,
And as you can see, the date on page 261 from the healthcare provider is what date?
January 8th.
Now, you heard the testimony of Ms. Harris today that she believes she forwarded to the company on or about January 11th. You recall that?
Yes,
Do you believe that to be accurate, that the company received it on or around January 11th?
yes.
Now, looking at page 255, does Ms. Harris's request apply to both physical therapy and to the actual surgery?
Yes, it does.
Now, I'd like you to take a look at Respondents Exhibit 15. Excuse me, 14. Can you identify for the record what this document is?
This is the designation notice for family and medical leave. It's the approval.
Okay, and does it approve all of the leave requested?
It does, yes.
And the check mark, the first check mark on the left-hand margin indicates that for the request that you're approving all leave taken for the reason designated.
Correct.
Sitting here today, what was your understanding of what you were approving of Ms. Harris as it relates to her back and neck?
She would need time off for physical therapy. She would need time off for surgery in March. And she would also need time if she had any flare-ups and was unable to work.
So it is your understanding today that you approved everything as it relates to the FMLA request of Ms. Harris as it relates to her back and neck issues.
Correct.
And exhibit 14 confirms that.
Yes.
I'd like you to take a look at what's being marked as exhibit 15, age 312. Identify for the record what this is.
It's a notice of eligibility of rights and responsibilities, and again, approval for family medical leave.
Okay, and this was provided to Ms. Harris as well?
Correct.
Now, you heard Ms. Harris's testimony today about her being approved to take physical therapy appointments. You recall that?
Yes.
What was your understanding as to the company's position relative to the physical therapy?
That she was approved to take them. She was, to my understanding, supposed to let her supervisor know when she would be gone for those.
Okay, and it is your understanding that those were due to an emergency or a pre-scheduled appointment at the discretion of both the physical therapist and Ms. Harris?
They were pre-scheduled.
Okay. Now, you heard Ms. Harris's testimony today that she felt that it was wrong of the company to call her back on December 15th because of the audit. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you have any information that you're aware of relative to what happened on the 15th?
From my understanding, the BRC audit, it's scheduled in advance. The entire quality department is frequently asked to participate in that. And it was communicated to the entire quality department that they needed to be available on that day to participate if they were needed. What was not known is the exact time people might be needed.
Is it your understanding that Ms. Harris was notified of this BRC audit ahead of time?
She was.
Was it also your understanding that Ms. Harris sat in an all-quality meeting the morning of the 15th at 8 o'clock and notified that you need to be on call and ready all day?
Yes, that was my understanding.
Are you aware of whether or not Ms. Harris attempted to reschedule her appointment for the 15th?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Do you have any understanding as to what happened when they couldn't find Ms. Harris?
They tried to physically locate Shanta, and when they were not able to, either Song or Kyle called her on her cell phone to inquire where she was, as they were going to need her to speak with the BRC auditor. And that's when she indicated she was either had left or was leaving for the physical therapy appointment.
Okay. So her necessity in being at the BRC audit was communicated ahead of time.
It was.
And also communicated on the same day.
Correct.
And it didn't have anything to do with attempting to restrict her rights under FMLA, did it?
No.
It was scheduled by BRC?
Yes.
And the BRC audit occurs how often?
From my understanding, it's normally an annual event.
Okay. And so this would have been the annual date for the audit, as far as you know?
As far as I know.
Now, the testimony of Ms. Harris, as far as her submitting the paperwork to the company on or around January 11th, 2021. After the company received the paperwork, did the company have any communication or clarifications going back and forth with the healthcare provider?
Yes, we did.
Now, you heard testimony this morning that there was a submission on January 25th by Ms. Harris's healthcare provider.
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, and you understand that it was received on or about that day?
Correct.
You also recall the testimony that there was a document from Bellin received on January 27th to further clarify issues related to the request for FMLA.
Correct.
And do you recall Ms. Harris's testimony that documents were received on or around February 22nd, 2021 related to the request for FMLA?
Correct.
So is it your testimony that there was fluid communication between Ms. Harris, her healthcare provider, and the company as it relates to the processing of the FMLA?
Yes, that is correct.
And when is it your understanding that the company actually approved FMLA?
The formal approval was on February 11th. But from my understanding through conversation with Lisa, she had told Shanta all of her appointments and everything would be approved. There was not a concern there. We were just waiting for some clarification on some of the other items.
Okay. I'd like you to take a look what's been marked as exhibit 13, page 308. You've heard testimony. I questioned Ms. Harris on this document previously. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Can you identify for the judge what this document is?
this is a copy of an electronic record, timekeeping record.
And is it related to a particular pay period?
Yes, it would be the pay period Monday, the 1st of February through Friday, the 12th of February of 2021.
So you heard Ms. Harris's testimony earlier that she questioned whether or not her absences were approved or not approved under FMLA prior to receiving approval on the 11th. Do you recall
Correct. Yes.
that? Can you identify for the judge what this document says relative to the February 8th absence?
It shows that FMLA was approved for that day for 8 hours.
Okay. And you heard Ms. Harris question why it did not show the 15th and 16th as approved.
Yes,
Do you have any response to that inquiry?
because that was the next pay period. It would not be on this time card.
Sitting here today, do you understand that the 15th and 16th were approved for FMLA?
Yes,
Now, you heard Ms. Harris's testimony relative to believing that somehow her rights under exercising her FMLA were restrained or inhibited by the company.
mhm,
You recall?
yes,
Can you confirm that all the physical therapy appointments were approved as FMLA leave?
yes, they were.
And the testimony relative to February 8th, February 15th and 16th, you sitting here today can confirm that those were approved FMLA leaves.
Correct.
If there was an attendance infraction issued for any absences related to her medical condition, would you be aware of that?
I would be.
And sitting here today, did the company ever discipline her for being absent for any of her medical related issues?
No.
Okay. Now, I'd like you to take a look at exhibit 18, ERD page 325. You've heard testimony from Ms. Harris on this document.
Yes.
Okay. And what is your understanding of why exhibit 18 was issued to Ms. Harris?
From my understanding, it was issued because there were frequent ongoing concerns with Shanta's attendance at work. And the coaching, it's a coaching, it's not a discipline, but to help Shanta understand that what was currently happening was not acceptable and she needed to improve her attendance.
And what did you understand the basis for why she was having attendance issues to be?
From what I understood through conversations, she had a small child she was trying to care for. She also had a sister that had a health condition, and she had car issues. She was from what I remember, seeing somebody who lived in the Milwaukee area, and a couple, either once or twice, I'm not sure, had car trouble then getting back on a timely basis.
So your understanding is that this issue didn't have anything to do with FMLA.
No, it did not.
Back in October of 2019, had Ms. Harris requested any FMLA?
No,
Did she indicate that she needed any medical procedure back in February of 2019? Excuse me, October.
no,
So this coaching, which you indicated wasn't even a warning, was related to just her general attendance for a multitude of personal issues.
correct.
Now, you heard the questions related to the February 23rd, 2021 meeting that Mr. Dahlen and yourself were involved with.
Yes,
And according to Ms. Harris's testimony, she was issued a suspension.
correct.
Okay, and I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 23, page 347. Can you identify for the record what Exhibit 23 is?
This is the disciplinary suspension form that was issued to Shanta for removing production paperwork.
And it was signed by Mr. Dahlen.
Correct.
Were you present in the preparation of this or delivery of this?
Yes,
Okay, and can you identify briefly what the purpose of the discipline was?
the purpose of the discipline was to ensure that Shanta understood fully that taking production paperwork was not an acceptable practice and that it could lead to termination if it continued.
Okay, and are you aware of whether or not Ms. Harris had been previously coached or warned about this type of conduct?
She was, yes.
Okay, and what do you recall from that?
I was a participant in meetings that she had with her immediate supervisor, Song Vang, regarding her performance improvement plan. And in those meetings, there was a conversation where on, I believe it was January 18th, Shanta had removed a camera and or some paperwork from the facility. And Song talked about that was not allowed. So I made sure that we talked about that fully so that Shanta understood that if it continued, she could be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination, because it's a very, very serious violation to take paperwork that's needed out of the facility.
Okay, sitting here today, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Ms. Harris understood the importance of that?
I am sure she understood, yes.
Now, you heard the questions related to Mr. Motts being disciplined,
Yes,
and are you aware of whether or not Mr. Motts has been disciplined?
yes, he was.
Was he issued a suspension?
He was.
Was he issued a suspension by Ms. Harris?
Yes,
Okay, and it was related to record keeping, correct?
correct.
So, you know, as it relates to it, I know that we'll have different witnesses testify to this, but is it your understanding that there is a requirement that production paperwork be kept on site?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And if the company is found to not have it on site, there are issues, correct?
Correct.
And the company could be issued or cited for not having that paperwork.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And the company holds various certifications for purposes of being able to manufacture the products it does, correct?
Correct.
Including certification from the USDA.
Yes,
Now, you heard Ms. Shanta's testimony that there are a number of food safety procedures that are required for purposes of processing the products that the company does, correct?
correct.
So in order to keep the certifications, in order to show that the company is serious about complying with USDA and DRC, they have certain standards they have to meet, correct?
Yes,
Now, you were present during the meeting on the 23rd, on February 23rd.
yes, I was.
Now, you heard Ms. Harris's testimony that on the 17th, on February 17th, 2021, the paperwork went missing, correct?
Yes,
And do you know whether or not anybody sent out an email inquiring as to where the paperwork was?
Yes, someone did.
And was Ms. Harris copied on that email?
She was.
And are you aware of whether she responded to that email?
To my knowledge, she did not.
Okay. Do you know whether or not Ms. Harris was approached as to whether or not she knew where the paperwork was on the 18th?
She was, yes.
And do you understand whether or not she lied about where it was?
To Song Bang, she did lie, yes.
Okay. On the 23rd, did Ms. Harris make an admission to you and to Mr. Dallin about lying?
She did, yes.
Okay. Now, as far as her, the supervision of Ms. Harris, do you know when she started in the position who her supervisor was?
It was Kyle Dolan.
Okay. And at the time of her resignation, do you know who her supervisor was?
It was Song Bang.
Okay. So just so I've got the timeline correct, Ms. Harris lied to her supervisor on February 18th about where the paperwork was,
Correct,
and then came clean on the 23rd in the meeting with you and Mr. Dowell.
correct.
Okay. On the 23rd, did you request that, excuse me, on the 22nd or 23rd, did you request that Ms. Harris return to work?
Lisa Ryzen called and left her a message that we wanted her to come in on the 23rd so we could discuss her return to work.
Okay. So sitting here today, you had every expectation that Ms. Harris was returning to work.
Correct. We reactivated her badge so she would be able to return to work.
Okay. And after meeting with you and Mr. Dowling, Ms. Harris left the meeting and went out to the parking lot. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
And did she come back in?
Eventually, yes.
And did she hand you or anybody her badge and tender her resignation?
After a discussion, she did, yes.
Okay. Did she indicate that she was resigning because you inhibited her rights under FMLA?
No,
Did she indicate that there was anything related to her back condition or her neck?
no.
Okay. During the meeting on the 23rd, was there any discussion about FMLA or FMLA leave or surgery?
No,
Okay. The meeting on the 23rd dealt specifically and only with issues related to her removing the paperwork.
correct.
And, as you testified a moment ago, the company has disciplined people by way of suspension for similar type of conduct.
Correct.
Okay. Um, I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 21 of the respondent. Okay, identify for the judge what that document is.
Yes, that's the performance improvement plan that was developed for Shanta.
And were you present when the performance improvement plan was discussed or implemented or issued to Ms. Harris?
I was, yes.
Can you tell me what your involvement in that was?
I was involved in the initial meeting to give Shanta the performance improvement plan. And then I was also involved in the meetings every week that were held to discuss her performance.
Okay. So by way of background, performance improvement plans are issued for purposes of helping employees achieve what you want them to accomplish in their performance.
Correct.
So would you agree that it's a guide on how to improve your performance?
Yes, it is a very specific guide.
Okay. And so at this point in time, on January 12th, 2021, the company's not intending to terminate Ms. Harris's employment at that point in time, correct?
No.
So it's gonna take 5 minutes. I might be done with this witness.
All right, sure. We can take a 5-minute break.
She's Ms. Kraft.
All right. So, Ms. Harris, do you have any questions for Ms. Kraft?
Yes, ma'am. I have a few questions.
Go ahead.
Regarding the reasons why I received duplicate documentation, did I come to you for documentation, Ms. Kraft?
No.
You stated that I had indicated that I had misplaced or potentially lost the previous documents. How were you notified of that?
We couldn't hear any of that. It was all distorted. Maybe a little bit further away from your speaker.
Could you
Ms.
repeat your
You said,
question, Ms. Harris?
can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Can you hear
Can
her
you all
now?
hear me?
We can't, Your Honor.
Well, they said they can't
No.
hear you. I'm
No?
not sure what's going on.
We can hear you, Judge, clearly. Ms. Harris is all distorted.
Can you say something now, Ms. Harris?
Hello?
Yeah, can you say something now, Ms. Harris?
Yes, I said hello.
Okay.
We heard hello. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
continue
can you
then,
hear
Ms.
me
Harris. I
now
think they can
clearly?
hear you now.
Did you hear any of my question, Attorney Gill?
No, repeat your question, Ms. Harris. I don't think they heard any of it.
My question was, if I had not come to you, how did you learn that or come to know that multiple documents were issued to me because I had misplaced them?
From communication with Lisa Ryzen.
Okay. And I do have an additional question regarding I believe it was the
Ms. Harris, it seems like when you're facing the direction you are right now, we can hear you perfectly clearly.
You can hear if I do this here, Attorney Gill?
It seems like when you were talking a moment ago and you're facing, I don't know, paperwork or something and not the screen, we can hear you clearly. But it's when you're directly facing the screen, it seems like that's when it becomes distorted maybe.
Oh, perhaps my audio thing is here. Can you hear me okay right now? I'm leaning towards the other side of my laptop. Am I clear?
It's pretty distorted right now.
What about here?
I can hear you. A little distorted, but I can understand you.
Would you mind if I logged out and then logged back in? Would that be acceptable?
Sure, if you want to try that, go ahead, Ms. Harris. That's fine.
Yeah, let me disconnect and reconnect. I'll be right back.
Okay,
Thank you all.
sure.
Judge, are you able to hear it clearly? Or is it just us?
This time I was able to hear. There was a few times earlier this morning where it would kind of come in and out, but this most recent questioning, I was able to hear her. Okay, I turned the recording back on. So Ms. Harris, you can continue with your questioning now.
Ms. Brown, are you able to hear me accurately?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. And they said they can hear you now as well.
Okay. So with regards to the documented coaching, Ms. Kraft, what is the escalation process policy for Nueske with regards to disciplinary?
Our progressive discipline policy.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a progressive discipline policy that's got several steps to it. There's a documented verbal, a written warning, suspension, and termination.
How does coaching play into that factor?
I'm going to object to the relevancy, Judge. I don't know what the questions related to the progressive discipline are even relevant if the issue at hand is the interference with or exercising of FMLA.
What is the relevancy, Ms. Harris?
Attorney Gill had made mention, as well as Ms. Kraft made mention that the write-up that I had, well, the documented coaching that I had received in this October 15th of 2019 was only a documented coaching. So I'm trying to understand how that would not be considered as progressive disciplinary. As I understand it, with my role there, that would be beginnings of a disciplinary action.
So, Judge, I guess I'll respond to that too, just to the relevance of this. I mean, that document was only really discussed. Obviously, we submitted as an exhibit, but it wouldn't have even been brought up as far as moved to be admitted, but for the fact that Ms. Harris had referenced it during her testimony and that we provided clarification of her testimony. But regardless of it, was a document from 2019 and has nothing to do, as according to Ms. Harris's testimony, any FMLA, any exercise of her FMLA, or anything related to FMLA.
Well,
So
Ms.
your
Kraft, does
apologies, go ahead, ma'am.
does a verbal coaching play any kind of role in the progressive disciplinary policy?
It does not. In addition, the progressive disciplinary policy, anything received under that, a documented warning or anything, is only relevant for 12 months also.
Is that written into policy, Ms. Kraft?
Did you ask if that was a written policy?
Is that particular portion of the statement, is that written into Nueske's policy?
It is.
And then, okay, and then regarding my FMLA submittal, what are the two forms of notification that the company acknowledges?
So are you talking about Respondents Exhibit 14 and 15, Ms. Harris?
Would you mind pulling that up? I don't know them off the top of my head, but I would know what I'm referring to if you had them appear on the screen.
Let me just get there 1 second. Exhibit 14 is this document. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the document you're
I'm
referring to?
No, ma'am. I'm referring to the company's FMLA policy.
Okay. I believe that's Exhibit 2, Respondents Exhibit 2. Is this what you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right.
And
So then what? I was just going to say, Ms. Harris, you can go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead.
what are the two forms of notification that the company acknowledges?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
For FMLA notification, what are the two forms that the company acknowledges for initial notification for FMLA?
You mean that do we acknowledge from an employee or that we do?
The employee, ma'am.
I don't understand the question either, Judge.
Are you asking them, Ms. Harris, what documentation they require of employees to submit for FMLA purposes?
Yes, but I'm specifically asking what are the notification parameters for FMLA? So what are the companies, what does the company acknowledge for notification of FMLA? The initial notification, it's outlined on form within this document. One moment, please.
Sure.
It would be N.
So section N of this policy.
Yes, ma'am.
So the section here, it starts on ERD 214 and goes on to ERD 215, procedure for requesting FMLA leave.
Yes, ma'am. So this procedure indicates that verbal notification or verbal request as well as written is accepted. And then documentation would be provided within 5 days to the employee. So what I was asking Ms. Kraft was, what are the two forms of notification that the company acknowledges, which would be based on the written policy that is here, it would be verbal and written. So in addition to that, I'd like you to scroll to the lettering O in this policy.
Well, first of all, Ms. Kraft, do you agree that if an employee makes a written request for FMLA, that's acceptable?
Yes,
Okay.
And verbal?
And a verbal request as well is acceptable?
yes.
Okay. And then in section O, what's your question, Ms. Harris?
So this section indicates that within 5 days, a approval or denial would be submitted after receiving certification documentation. Is that accurate to my understanding?
It is, when we have all of the appropriate documentation, yes.
Okay. And so the last submittal that I had understood, and this would be what I had received from forwarded from Terry, would have been on the 27th, and I would not have been given approval within that 5 days. As I look at the submittals from the 27th and the submittals from my doctor's office on the 22nd, they don't appear to be extremely different. So my question is, what would have prohibited that 5-day window from being approved from the 27th?
There was continued discussion between Nueske's and your healthcare providers to provide some clarification on some of the accommodations that you were requesting.
So that would be FDA related? I'm sorry, ADA related, Ms. Kraft?
Could you repeat that? I can't understand you.
ADA related, not FMLA related for the back, neck, and shoulder?
Yes, because we were requesting some clarification on the episodic flare-ups. And until we had that, Lisa had verbally given you the okay that it would be approved and you could schedule all of your PT appointments.
So if I look at the documents from the 27th and compare them to the 22nd, that specific section of the documents that were sent over don't appear to have changes to it. So my question is, what would have prevented if no additional information for the neck, shoulder, and back pain were needed for the approval process?
I would object to ask and answer, Judge. She had indicated previously that it had been already conditionally approved and told Ms. Harris to go ahead and schedule all her appointments.
But I think Ms. Harris's question is if it's approved, then why not submit the documentation? Right, Ms. Harris, is that what you're getting at?
Yes, ma'am.
So why wasn't the documentation showing that her leave had been approved provided within 5 days of either January 22nd or January 27th?
From my understanding, speaking with Lisa Ryzen, we had asked for additional information from the healthcare provider. And then I believe they came back with the exact same information. And there was no further clarification coming.
Okay, yes, that is accurate if I look at the facts that would have been sent over on 2/22, which would have been after the approval. So my question is, what would have been the delay for approval if you would have accepted and approved FMLA on February 11th without that documentation? If the same documentation that was submitted on the 27th of January was adequate to providing my approval notice, why was it not issued within 5 days of that last documentation provided by my healthcare provider?
I can't speak specifically as to that.
You said you cannot speak specifically to that?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions, ma'am.
All right. Ms. Kraft, did you have any involvement in the communications that were going back and forth with Ms. Harris's doctors about her request for FMLA leave?
My only communication was with or through Lisa Ryzen, not specifically or directly to a healthcare provider.
Okay. And then the same thing with the documentation that was completed, the two notifications that have been identified as Response Exhibit 14 and Response Exhibit 15. Did you complete those or did Lisa Ryzen complete those?
Lisa Ryzen.
Okay. All right. Attorney Gill, did you have any other questions for Ms. Kraft?
No.
Ms. Harris, did you have any other questions for Ms. Kraft?
Yes, I have one more question for Ms. Kraft.
Go ahead.
Ms. Kraft, you had indicated that with regarding to documentation and specific documentation not being on site could result in a nonconformance from USDA and potentially BRC. Do you know specifically what documents would trigger a nonconformance for each of those regulatory bodies?
I do not, and I did not say it would trigger a nonconformance. Those were not my words.
No, you did not say nonconformance. Attorney Gill actually was speaking to it, and it would be, I think, Attorney Gill, you said out of compliance?
But you can just ask your question, Miss Harris.
Well, that was my question. Would she know specifically what documents would ensued a regulatory, whether it BRC or HACCP, non-conformance? And she had answered my question, so thank you.
All right. Anything else, Miss Harris?
No, ma'am. Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Kraft.
All right. Attorney Gill, anything else from this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So then, are you calling any additional witnesses?
Yeah, we've got a number of additional witnesses.
Okay. Who's your next witness then?
We'll call Lisa Ryzen next.
Okay. We'll go back on the record. Ms. Ryzen, before we take your testimony, I'll have to swear you in. If you could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you will give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you can put your hand down. And could you just state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Sure. Lisa Ryzen,
And Ryzen is R-I-S-E-N?
Risen.
All right. Attorney Gill, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and ask the questions.
Ms. Ryzen, where do you currently work?
Nueske, Applewood, Smoke Meats.
Okay, and the judge wants to
Oops,
look
sorry.
at the screen when you're doing this. I'll kind of direct you that way. How long have you worked for Neskes?
5 years.
And what position do you hold at Neskes?
HR generalist.
In that position, what are your responsibilities?
I administer the benefits and take care of all FMLA.
You familiar with Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall what position Ms. Harris was employed in?
Quality assurance supervisor,
And do you know how long Ms. Harris was employed at the company?
approximately 4 years.
Okay. Do you know whether or not Ms. Harris was terminated from the company or resigned?
She resigned.
Okay. Were you involved in the administration of the FMLA for Ms. Harris?
Yes,
And you are involved in administrating all FMLA for Neskes?
correct.
In that capacity, do you ever work with Ms. Kraft?
Yes.
And in what capacity would you work with Ms. Kraft on what occasion?
Well, she's my supervisor, so my manager. So I work with her if I need to consult with her on cases or if we're working on a project together.
Okay, so as it relates to FMLA itself, you're the one in charge of administering it?
Yes,
Okay. Do you understand the basis for why Ms. Harris has filed a complaint against the company?
yes.
And what do you understand it to be?
That she felt that she alleged that her FMLA rights were not,
Restrained,
yes,
inhibited?
yes.
Sitting here today, did you restrain or inhibit any of Ms. Harris's exercising of her FMLA?
No,
When did you first become aware of any type of FMLA issue for Ms. Harris?
she had come into my office on December 14th, and she said she was having surgery and she would like 2 copies of FMLA in March. One for one doctor, one for another doctor.
Okay, at any point in time prior to December 14th, did Ms. Harris request FMLA paperwork of you?
She did for her sister. Her sister had surgery and she did request paperwork back a year before that, prior to that. But other than that, that's the only time.
Okay, so as it relates to Ms. Harris's back issue or any issue in 2020, was the first time you had a conversation about FMLA with Ms. Harris on December 14th?
Yes,
And during that meeting, you indicated that you physically gave her 2 applications for FMLA.
along with the policy. I always give the policy with the FMLA paperwork.
Okay, so take a look at what's been marked as response exhibit 2. She'll have it up on the screen.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's the policy.
So you would have given this policy in addition to 2 of the applications to Ms. Harris.
Yes,
That was on December 14th, 2020.
correct.
Did you hear from Ms. Harris again requesting documentation?
Yes,
And when was that?
that was on December 18th.
And what did you do after you received a request for additional paperwork?
I gave it to her again.
Okay. Now I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 5, page 224. Do you see that document? What is that?
That's right. I sent it to her. I emailed it to another copy to her.
Okay, so this was pursuant to her request?
Yes,
Did you get an additional request of Ms. Harris?
yes, January 4th.
Okay, I'd like you to take a look at ERD page 230, Exhibit 6. And is this an email with that you sent to Ms. Harris on that day?
Correct, yes,
So sitting here today, you gave the paperwork to Ms. Harris on 3 separate occasions.
correct.
Okay, you worked for the company for 5 years.
Yes,
Have you ever had to give anybody an application for FMLA 3 separate times?
no, I have not.
When Ms. Harris requested that you provide her the certification application, did you provide it?
Yes,
Did you provide it timely?
yes,
Okay. Now, do you recall, I'm going to take a look at or do you recall sitting here today when you first received the paperwork from Ms. Harris for purposes of the application?
on January 8th from Bellin.
Okay. And did Ms. Harris email it to you as well? You recall?
No,
Okay, there's testimony Ms. Harris this morning that she emailed it to you on January 11th as well. Sitting here today, you don't recall whether or not you got it done?
there was, I don't recall.
Okay. Now, I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 8. Can you identify for the record what this document is?
That's Ms. Harris's FMLA paperwork.
Okay, and this was submitted to you for approval?
Correct.
Okay, after you received this document, what did you do?
So Ms. Harris and I had a conversation and I told her that I did receive the paperwork and that her FMLA was approved, but I was just waiting on some more clarification regarding some of the wording in it.
Okay, so when you received this,
Mhm.
whether it was the 8th or the 11th, you verbally told Ms. Harris that it was approved.
Yes,
Okay, and did you have further communications with her health providers?
yes, because I had to reach back to them on clarification on, there was documentation on breaks. So we want a little bit of explanation, how frequent breaks she might need, what type of, could noise preventing headphones, what other, it was very vague, I guess. So we just needed some more details on some of the requests in it.
But you're confident you're sitting here today under oath that you informed Ms. Harris that her FMLA was approved almost momentarily after you received the paperwork?
Yes,
Okay. Now, did you have any conversation with Ms. Harris about any of her physical therapy appointments?
yep, she gave me a copy of them and I said, make sure you are approved to go to your appointments. Make sure to give Song, her supervisor, a copy so that he knew when she was gonna have her appointments. And she said she did put them on her calendar that she had these appointments.
Okay. So take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 3, page 217. Does this document look familiar?
Yes,
And what do you understand this document to be?
that was her appointments to go to therapy.
Okay, and the appointments date back to November 30th and through December on this page?
She didn't give till those dates were gone or
Okay.
passed already, I guess I should
Judge, can
say.
you scroll through the exhibit here? Okay, so this document looks familiar and you believe that she submitted this document to you?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
And upon receipt of it, what did you tell her?
that she was through her FMLA, she was cleared to go to her appointments.
Okay. And did she go to her appointments to your knowledge?
Yes,
And was she disciplined for going to any of her appointments?
no,
Okay. Did you continue to receive documentation from Ms. Harris's healthcare provider?
yes,
Do you recall who her healthcare provider was?
Ellen Health.
I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 11. Page 281, Judge. What is this document?
That's the fax that came in for her paperwork.
And the sticky note that's copied on the front page that says bound fax on January 25, is that you?
Yes,
Okay. And you received this on January 25th, you believe?
yes,
Okay. And this was a follow-up in regard to additional information?
yes.
All right. Can you take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 12, page 295? What is this document?
That's again where they faxed paperwork.
Okay, and there's a post-it note copy on the front page that says, this was faxed to me on January 27th.
Correct.
Is that your note?
Yes,
And you believe that you received it on about January 27th?
yes,
Take a look at Exhibit 13, page 306, Judge. Identify what this document is.
can you scroll up just a little more?
Can you see it?
I only can see the first page.
Okay.
That was a doctor's note.
Okay, is that your post-it on the front page?
Yes, correct,
And you received it on or about February 11th?
correct.
Do you recall sitting here today when you approved, when you gave you indicated previously you gave verbal approval to Ms. Harris right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes,
And you indicated, do you know when you gave her like a written approval? And what day?
February 11th.
Okay, I'd like to take a look at what's been marked as exhibit 14. Here, the page 310.
Yes,
And what is this document?
that's her approval.
Okay, if you take a look at the section that's first bolded, that's got a check mark in the left-hand margin, that indicates your FMLA leave is approved. All leave taken for this reason will be designated as FMLA leave.
Correct.
You provided this to Ms. Harris,
Yes, I did.
and you provided it in response to her application on January 8th for FMLA.
Yes,
And did this apply to both her physical therapy or surgery and any flare-ups?
yep, yes,
Okay, so this was an all-encompassing, you're approved for everything.
yes,
Now, you had provided approval already verbally.
yes.
Okay. Is there any question in your mind that Ms. Harris understood on or about January 8th or 11th that she was approved for FMLA?
There is no doubt because once the faxes came in, her and I always communicated, yes, I have the fax. Yes, I have everything I need. This is approved, it was approved. Go to your appointments, make sure your supervisor knows of your appointments.
Do you know whether or not Ms. Harris was disciplined in any capacity for any of her physical therapy appointments?
No,
Was she disciplined for any of her flare-up days?
no,
Now, Ms. Harris testified that she was out on February 8th, February 15th, and 16th for flare-ups. Do you know whether she was disciplined for those days?
no,
She was not.
No.
Okay. So I'd like you to take a look at what has been marked as Exhibit 15. Identify for the judge what this document is.
that's approval for her FMLA.
Okay, and you provided this to Ms. Harris via email?
Correct.
And did she respond to you after you sent it to her in email?
No,
I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 16. Identify for the judge what this document is.
FMLA paperwork from Mellon.
So this is additional FMLA paperwork submitted to you on February 22nd.
Correct.
So this paperwork was submitted 11 days after you already approved,
Yes,
written approval. And if you take a look at page 317. Does it indicate that the request is for physical therapy and surgery? Halfway through the page. PT and plastic surgery.
yes,
And your understanding sitting here today was that the request for FMLA was for physical therapy,
yes,
flare-ups,
yes,
and surgery.
correct.
Did you have any discussion with Ms. Harris about her getting her surgery scheduled at any point?
No,
Did you know what she had it scheduled or she was going to schedule it?
she said it was scheduled for early March. I knew that.
Okay, and you told her, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, she had it all planned.
Okay. So you testified a moment ago that you had constant communication with Ms. Harris. Is that correct?
Yes,
And so you were transparent relative to the information you received and what additional information you needed.
Yes,
But under no circumstance, but under no circumstances did you indicate that her FMLA was denied.
never.
In fact, you told her it was approved verbally right away.
Yes.
After you approved the FMLA, did Ms. Harris represent to you that she had any issues with her FMLA?
No,
Did she indicate to you that she had any issues scheduling her PT appointments?
no,
Did she indicate that she had a problem scheduling her surgery?
no.
Were you aware that Ms. Harris was out due to a flare-up on February 8th and February 15th, 16th?
I only knew of the 8th.
Okay. And do you know that whether that was approved?
Yes,
Okay,
I personally put in her approved time in her time card.
okay. So let's take a look at, we take a look at exhibit 13, page 308, Judge. You identify for the judge what that document is
That's Miss Harris's time card.
for a particular pay period.
Yes,
And can you see, I know the font is small, but can you see February 8th?
yes.
And what does it indicate for the pay code?
It has FMLA 8 hours.
Okay. And would you have entered that?
I did.
And would you have entered that on or about February 11th when you got the note from the doctor?
Correct.
Do you recall doing that?
Yes,
Okay. Sitting here today, do you recall any issues related to Ms. Harris's back were approved as FMLA?
yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions for Ms. Ryzen?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Ms. Ryzen, Judge, if you could pull up the exhibit, I'm not sure what the number, it would be the company FMLA policy. I want to say 15, but I feel that is incorrect.
Well, we have it for you as Exhibit 4, and I think respondent as Exhibit 2.
They're the same document, so whichever is more accessible to you.
Since I had the respondents open already, I'll just show her respondents Exhibit 2.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Could you scroll down to letter O of the policy?
Sure. Okay, so that's section O of the policy.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Ryzen, anywhere in, is it outlined in Nueske policy at all that verbal approval is a form of approval? to the employee that's requesting FMLA.
Could you repeat? I'm sorry. I had a hard time understanding you.
Can you hear me now, ma'am?
That's,
Ms. Ryzen?
go ahead.
You said that's worse. Did you say that's worse?
That's better now. I can hear you.
Okay. Let me know if you lose me at any point. Is it outlined in the Nueske's policy that verbal approval of FMLA is a form of approval notification?
What did she ask? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're asking.
With regards to approval notifications as it's outlined in the Nueske's policy, is
Yep.
verbal one of the notifications of approval?
Yes.
Where would that be located in the policy? Verbal approval of FMLA?
Well, we also give the written, but I don't know if you remember, Shanta, we had a lot of problems with those faxes going back and forth and back and forth. That's why there was a little bit of delay with getting you the written approval.
With regards to the verbal approval, is that outlined anywhere in the Nueske's policy?
No, it's not.
Okay. If you could scroll up to that same document up to H. I apologize, not H, it's I. I is in igloo.
So this section right here, Ms. Harris?
I believe so, yes, ma'am. You're gonna kill me. Actually, it's N. I apologize. It's section N. It's the procedure for request. Ms. Ryzen, do you acknowledge that verbal and written communication of FMLA policy, I'm sorry, of verbal and written requests or notification is written into the policy when it pertains to an employee communicating FMLA being needed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, could you please go to complainants exhibit 1?
Is there a certain page, Ms. Harris?
Scroll down, please. Ms. Ryzen, does these documents look familiar to you at all?
I haven't seen these documents before I saw the paperwork. No.
Okay. When FMLA or any documentation comes through the reception area, is it not forwarded to you?
No, it is not.
Okay. Could you go to complainant exhibit number 2, please? Can you scroll? Do these documents look familiar to you, Ms. Ryzen?
No, they don't.
Okay, so these are the documents that I would have submitted to you in November. We've been provided a copy of these November 19th, the week of the
Quick question.
19th. Excuse me, Attorney Gill?
I said I'm objecting that this, if you've got a question of the witness, it's one thing, but it appears you're testifying as to what this is. And you've had your opportunity to testify and you will on rebuttal, but needs to be a question of the witness.
So did you receive these documents that I just was scrolling through rather quickly, Ms. Ryzen?
Just the upper portion, ma'am.
Nope. I have never seen these before when the paperwork came in.
Okay, in July of 2020, do you recall a conversation that we had upon my return from work? Well, back to work, it would have been a roughly 2 months after, regarding signing back up for Nueske insurance benefits.
Regarding what?
Do you recall? Me re-implementing my Nueske's medical benefits.
When you came back, you had a conversation that you didn't need them anymore because you were receiving benefits from the state and you wanted your benefits canceled.
And during that conversation, do you recall us having a conversation of me explaining you that my surgery was approved?
Not then, I don't know.
Okay. And if you could pull up exhibit it would be respondents exhibit 15. I believe this would be the one with the 25th. I have two notations here. If you could continue to scroll, please. Oh, I have the wrong date. Exhibit 16 then?
Okay.
Yep, just continue. Okay, yes, this would be the documentation. You testified that you and my healthcare provider were communicating via fax. Both Attorney Gill and I both submitted documentation that indicates that there were three incidences, well, now four with the 22nd, that conversations took place via fax. January 8th, January 19th, January 27th, and then February 22nd. If you recollect, does that sound accurate to you?
I think you said January 27th.
Yes, ma'am.
It was January 25th.
Would you mind going to complainant exhibit? One moment, please.
Is it complainants exhibit or respondents exhibits that you want?
It would be complainant exhibits. We both submitted the same documentation. If it's easier to locate it in the documents that pulled up, it would be the FMLA paperwork that has the date indication on the 27th from my healthcare provider.
I think, let me just
And
double.
I'm sorry, I don't remember all of the exhibits.
What are we looking for, Judge?
I think it's your exhibit 12, at least that's what I think we're talking about, the documentation from her medical providers on, did you say January 27th?
Yes, yes, thank you very much. So, it indicates in the fax imprint that there was correspondence between the 8th, 19th, 27. The question I have for you is, Ms. Ryzen, it was asked to Mona Craftman. She was not able to answer this. On the 27th, it appears that the questions were answered. And based on this documentation trail, my FMLA was approved based on the documentation received on January 27th. I do understand that additional documentation was received on February 22nd. My question is, based on your policy, I am to receive an approval or denial within 5 days of submission.
Judge, I'm going to object to the question. I mean, I'm looking at the basis of the complaint that was filed and the investigation. At no point in time did Ms. Harris raise the issue that she was concerned about the 5 days. There's no investigation into this issue. This is the first time today because I think Ms. Harris hasn't been able to establish anything or provide any evidence that we engaged in any restraint of her FMLA, that she's now switched to this topic, which was never even alleged in the complaint, never investigated. And now it's the focus of 2 hours of questioning.
My strategy is not to switch gears on my focus point. All of this is encompassing.
I'm looking,
So my intention,
was filed,
my,
no reference at all to the fact that you're concerned that you didn't get approval within 5 days of you submitting your application. There was never an investigation into that issue. This is the first time today that there's been a question related to the company's policy and whether or not they gave you a written response within 5 days.
sir, this is their FMLA policy, and their FMLA policy mimics
Your complaint,
federal regular,
Don't
federal reg.
Don't
Eh,
talk
there are
over
many
each other.
things.
Just stop talking right now. You guys are talking over each other and it's just
Oh,
mumble jumble to me. I can't hear it. So Miss
okay,
Harris,
I
continue on.
apologize, Attorney
Continue on, Miss
Gill.
Harris. Go ahead.
So what I was saying was, my intention was not to allude to me switching, as you put it, the strategy, if you will. All of this, in my viewpoint, is pertaining to the initial complaints. My intention here is not to switch strategy, if that's what you're indicating, Attorney Gill. I'm just going off the evidence that we have in front of us, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if I'm in compliance or out of compliance here.
Did you have something to say, Attorney Gill?
Oh, Judge, my point is that I'm looking at her complaint right in front of me, which we all have copies of. And her claim is that we denied her intermittent FMLA and accommodations. That was the sole basis of her complaint. That was what the investigation was, and that's what the determination was. There was never an allegation at all about her feeling that there was a violation because she didn't receive a written response within 5 days. She's already testified that she got pre-approval on the FMLA. She already, this is Ms. Harris. Mrs. Harris' own testimony said she was never disciplined for any PT appointments, for any flare-ups, for scheduling her for surgery. The sole issue that she's brought up is she said somehow her intermittent FMLA and accommodations was restrained. And now we're questioning at length about a 5-day response, which had nothing to do with her complaint.
Well,
I'm going to allow the questioning, Ms. Harris. You don't have to say anything because I think part of her complaint has been that she was not clear on when whether her leave was approved. And I think your witnesses have testified that the reason why she didn't get the written approval right away is because they had questions about her application. And I quite frankly am confused myself why it took so long from January 27th to February 11th to get her notification in writing saying that her leave was approved. So you can ask your question, Ms. Harris, and Ms. Ryzen, you can answer the question.
Thank you. So with regards to the documentation that was submitted by my healthcare provider on the 27th, compared to the documentation that was submitted on the February 22nd, does not appear to be different, specifically to the PT, in the surgery, physical, I'm sorry, plastic surgery. I had posed this question to Ms. Kraft. I wanted to understand why it took so long for my approval to come through, specifically for the physical issues being back, neck, and shoulder. I do understand that regarding the ADA, which we are not discussing here, there was additional clarity that was needed, but I received approval prior to February 22nd, 2021, for the neck, back, and shoulder FMLA. So what I was trying to understand is, if that was adequate enough for me to get approval on the 11th, why was it not submitted within that 5 days that's outlined in policy?
Because I did consult our benefits lawyer to make sure that what I was requesting information from was good. And the paperwork came after, I had all the paperwork back, all the clarification. So I waited till I had everything to give you, the written copy. There was a lot of faxes back and forth. As you can see, Bellen just kept sending the same faxes back and back. So it was.
Well, and I think that's the point Ms. Harris is trying to make. It seems like you haven't received any new information. And why then, if what you had back in January was sufficient, is ultimately what you used to decide on, like, I guess I'm confused too. Why keep going back and forth if they're not submitting anything new to you?
I guess because we were waiting for some more clarification with the ADA that was connected to it. So that's why.
And did you receive that information prior to you approving my FMLA?
Can you repeat that, Ms. Harris?
Yes, did you receive that information that you were waiting for prior to approving my FMLA on February 11th?
Some of it, yes.
Okay. So the next questions I have would be in regards to our conversations, verbal conversations leading up to my approval. Ms. Kraft indicated that I received, and I believe you did as well, in your testimony, that you provided me with FMLA documentation 3 separate times. And
Yes.
excuse me?
Yes.
And then from my accounts, ADA records 2 separate times.
Yes.
Okay. So we both are in agreement there. During the times leading up to each request, do you remember me verbally following up with you in between each request of documentation?
Can you repeat, Sean? It's cutting in and out.
Can you hear me now, Ms. Ryzen?
Did you hear?
Ms.
me?
Ryzen?
Yep, I can hear you.
That's good? I think I have to hold my head like a peacock a bit. I apologize. My question was, leading up to each of those requests for documentation, do you remember us having, do you remember me following up in between those requests for documentation?
We had lots of conversations with the paperwork, yes.
Okay, and at any point during our conversation, did you communicate to me that you had not received documentation from my healthcare provider prior to January 8th?
Yes,
Would that be for both FMLA and ADA?
just the FMLA.
Okay. With regards to the FMLA, I apologize. With regards to the ADA, your recollection of when you first issued me that documentation was sometime in December, I believe December 18th. Is that accurate?
Yes,
And you do not recollect providing me that documentation the week of November 30th.
no, I
Is
do
that
not.
accurate? Okay. That would be all for this witness. Thank you very much for allowing me.
Attorney Gill, do you have any other questions for the witness?
No additional questions, Judge.
Right. I just want to make sure I don't have anything for you. I guess I do have one question. It relates to respondents exhibits 14 and 15. Exhibit 14 was the February 11, 2021 designation notice showing that your FMLA leave has been approved. And then exhibit 15 is a notice of eligibility and rights and responsibilities, again, looking like FMLA leave has been approved. Why do you complete two different, or why did you complete both forms, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, if it's conveying the same information?
because I always do. That's just
Okay.
procedure, what I do, I guess. Because with FMLA trainings that I have taken, it is recommended that you do these both.
Why does this form that's up on the screen only reference the surgery, or at least what has been testified to be March 2021 as approximately when she would need to take leave for her surgery?
Because that's the date that I referenced for the surgery. And I just want to say something. I hope this is okay. I've seen FMLA paperwork a lot, and I've never had it come so with all different issues on it like that. It was very different than what I've ever experienced with FMLA paperwork.
So you mean you typically will get like one request for FMLA leave for a specific period of time, but not where there's a request? Because my understanding of what I've heard so far today is there was a request relating to intermittent leave for PT and flare-ups, and then another request for leave, potentially an extended leave for surgery and probably some kind of like post-op or something like that. Is that what you mean to have so many different requests, or are you referring to something else?
No, when Ms. Harris originally came to ask me for the FMLA paperwork, it was for the surgery and for her surgeon. She had never said that it was for the PT appointment. She came with that sheet afterwards.
Okay. And then you said part of the back and forth with her doctor had to deal with some clarification you needed, correct?
Well, in the beginning, it was, the fax didn't come. And it was a couple days and Shanta and I had a conversation and I said, Shanta, I don't have the fax yet. And then she called back Bellin to have it refaxed again. And then when it came, it was all little bitty, and I'm sure it's on the exhibit, it was little bitty pages of it. So we had to request, Shanta again went back and asked Bellin to fax it again.
Okay. So did you have questions though about some of the information that was submitted on the application? Let me see here. I think this is the one that's dated January 8th. These questions, is that your handwriting here?
That's Miss Crafts.
So where it says, what is, I can't even read that, sorry.
Stimulating.
Okay, what is stimulating definition? That's her handwriting?
Correct.
And then do you know this handwriting down here, what that would be then? Where I think it says due to location of her
Yeah,
workstation.
that's how Bellin answered it back. They just wrote on the side of it like that as well.
Okay, I think this was the wrong one because I think this had to do more with the ADA. Let me show you Exhibit 9. Because I think this is the one that we've been talking about here, is the request for PT or leave relating to her back injury. Is this your writing here, define flare-up?
Yes,
Okay, and so in your back and forth with the doctor, is that how you would communicate? You would like write a question on the application that was submitted and resend it back to the doctor and wait for a response back?
yes. I had tried calling, but never was getting a call back from them. So that's
Oh,
why it resulted to the faxing.
okay. And then this one here, which received back on January 25th. And we were just talking about the small pages. Is this what you're referring to? What's on the screen right here?
Yes,
Okay. But then just looking at the certification from the doctor here, what about these notes? Whose handwriting is it on these notes? Do you know?
the nurse.
So this is the nurse writing back to,
Correct.
okay, well, this is still the wrong one, sorry. I apologize. I think this is the one I want to show you because I think this again is the one that's relating to the PT. The last one I think had to deal more with the ADHD and the ADA accommodation. But then this one here. So you had said you wrote define flare up, correct? If I understand your testimony.
Yes,
And then the doctor is, or the nurse wrote back episodes of intractable pain. Is that your testimony?
yes.
Okay. And then the handwriting down here, how could this be known? Was that your handwriting?
That was Miss Crafts.
Okay. Would this be the nurse's handwriting down here though, estimated based on patient report of symptoms?
Yes.
Okay. Attorney Gill, do you have any other questions for Ms. Ryzen?
Hey, just a couple, Your Honor. So, Ms. Ryzen, your testimony a minute ago in response to judge's questions that you had a bunch of different issues going on with the FMLA. In reference to that, you're referring to the request for physical therapy,
Yes,
the request for the surgery,
yes,
the request for the flare-ups,
yes,
and the request for the ADHD.
yes,
So your testimony is that you're juggling a number of these issues, trying to process all the FMLA.
yes,
And so you had questions relative to the certification on both the back issues and the ADHD.
correct.
And as of Ms. Harris's resignation, were you still having discussions with her relative to what accommodations were even being requested on the FMLA application for ADHD?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further, Judge.
Ms.
How
Harris,
it-
do you have any questions for her?
Yes, how is it appropriate for the ADHD to continue to come up if we are not discussing that in this forum?
Well, and I'm not really focusing in on that.
And I'm just providing for purposes of clarification, asking the question because it was brought up and just generically some of the exhibits had referenced it. And so, to clarify the testimony of Ms. Ryzen, that's why I asked the question.
Is it okay? Can I ask Shanta?
No.
What? Okay.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions for Ms. Ryzen?
Yes, I do. Give me one moment,
Sure.
please, and thank you. One moment, I'm gonna refer to my exhibit so I don't have you popping around.
Okay.
Judge, while Ms. Harris is looking through her exhibits, what time did you plan on going until today? Just, I'm fine with whatever. I just was for purposes of telling the other witnesses.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. If you think we could get one more witness in tonight, if both Ms. Harris and all of you guys can do it, that's fine. But if you think it makes more sense just to wait and start fresh with the rest of your witnesses tomorrow, I'm fine with that too. I guess my question would just be if you have a witness that you know isn't going to take a lot of time, since I'm just looking, it's about 20 to 5. I mean, I can keep going, but I guess my question for you, Attorney Gill, would be, I mean, I'm assuming we'll have enough time to get through everybody tomorrow. But if you had a witness that maybe you knew wasn't going to be available tomorrow that you had to get in through tonight, we could stay later. Or if you think there's someone who's not going to take a lot of time and, we could get through them tonight, that's fine with me. We can stick a little bit later as well.
So our short witnesses we had reserved for tomorrow. So
Okay.
we have them show up. We've got 2 additional witnesses today. I don't think we'll be able to get through them that quick. I mean, the 2 witnesses that we still have here are Mr. Vang and Mr. Down, the 2 supervisors of Ms. Harris.
And I'm thinking, yeah, and I'm thinking they would probably take at least an hour, if not more, between you and Ms. Harris asking questions. So, I mean, I can definitely stick around and I don't have a time restraint tonight if we wanted to get through them. But if it's your preference to do them tomorrow, that I'm fine with that as well.
I'm going to mute for just 1 second and talk to Ms. Kraft if you would mind.
Sure.
Judge, I don't think that we'll be able to get either of the witnesses that are here done very quickly between Ms. Harris and myself. So I suggest that we start fresh with those in the morning.
Okay.
I'm confident that will get done tomorrow, just based upon the timing of even the short witnesses.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Harris, are you ready with your documents?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, then
Um,
go ahead and ask your questions.
the two occasions that Ms. Ryzen had communicated sending me FMLA and ADA documentation, do you recall the notation that you made in the subject line for the 18th?
The subject line for the 18th.
Yep, you sent me an email with ADA documentation, but it was labeled FMLA.
I don't recall.
Okay, and I did not submit that document,
Okay.
Judge, so I would not be able to show it, but that adds to the confusion FMLA versus ADA as well.
Do you have any other questions for her, Ms. Harris?
No, ma'am. Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Ryzen.
All right, anything else from you, Attorney Gill?
Just real briefly, Judge, Mr. Ryzen, can you describe for the judge the interactive engagement that you had with Ms. Harris from the point in time that she submitted the application to the point in time that you conditionally or verbally approved it to approved it?
Yes, we communicated, she came in, I gave her the paperwork, and whenever she asked for it, I gave it to her again. We talked back and forth that, no, I didn't get the facts yet. I would need them to resend it again. When I got the facts, I told her, yes, I have everything that I need for your surgery. Go ahead, make your appointments. We kept communicating. She would ask, where we were with the other, request. We had set up a meeting for that. I responded to Shanta always. We communicated. I never communicated so much with an FMLA case as I did with hers, to make sure that, we were both on the same page.
Did you ever restrain her right to exercise FMLA?
No,
Did
never.
you ever deny any of her requests for FMLA?
No.
Nothing further, Judge.
Ms. Harris, just want to make sure, do you have any other questions for Ms.
Yes, I
Ryzen?
do have additional questions. So with regards to the testimony that was just given, Ms. Ryzen, if notification of FMLA per Newski's policy is accepted by way of verbal, may I ask why the notations on the FMLA approvals did not backdate into 2020?
I'm not understanding. Could
The
you?
the documentations that I received back from you all only indicates approval starting, or only acknowledges the starting date of January 8th, 2021, when you and I had conversed about this, and I gave you verbal notification in November of 2020, but you're acknowledging that we had a conversation on the 18th and the 14th of December. Why wouldn't my documentation backdate to those dates specifically as a starting time? I'm just curious.
I'm still not understanding.
Wait, we didn't really hear the question. It was distorted.
I think what she's
Wasn't
asked, I'll rephrase it because I heard it, Ms. Harris. I think what she's asking is, I think you agree with Ms. Harris that her first communications about FMLA came in December of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes,
So her question was if it was okay for her to communicate verbally in December 2020 about using FMLA, why was the approval for FMLA starting on January 8th versus whatever day in December she made her initial approval or initial request, I should say.
Well, the 8th is when I got the paperwork back. That was up to Ms. Harris to give her doctors the paperwork. As soon, like, I get the paperwork when the doctors send it back is when it starts. I mean, she could have the paperwork for weeks.
Was that indicated to me, Ms. Ryzen? Because it was my understanding that based on our conversations, everything would be backdated.
What do you
And I started
backdated?
well, I started physical therapy in November. So my assumption, perhaps it was a poor assumption, is that the documentation would reflect the initial verbal conversations, which would be indicative of our
I
initial verbal conversations of
remember
FMLA.
going to physical therapy.
Excuse me?
I didn't know in November that you were going to physical therapy.
We definitely disagree on that. Okay. So in December, we do agree upon, why wouldn't the documentation reflect a December date of, well, December start date, if you will?
For your FMLA?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I have to have the paperwork back before I can approve it.
Judge, I think both parties testified and agreed that, pursuant to Exhibit 14, that the document clearly says that all leave taken for the reason is approved. I don't know that there's any dispute between the parties. I mean, I think there's confusion over, Exhibit 14 and Exhibit 15, but both Ms. Harris and when she received it and the witnesses testifying to the same thing.
Well, my initial testimony indicated that this approval was understood that it was for the partnering document, which would have been the surgery. And then you asked me a few questions. I don't know if we settled on agreements. It was my understanding, and this was communicated through Lisa, that I would receive documentation for both. So my
And
questions.
I'll just note, Ms. Harris, that you filed your FMLA complaint with the Equal Rights Division in March of 2021. And so whether or not you got leave back in 2019, my understanding would be that would be outside the statute of limitations period because of the amount of time that you have to file an FMLA complaint. So if you believe that you were denied FMLA in 2019, I don't know that I could even address it with this complaint because it wasn't filed until March of 2020.
Yes, ma'am. I have no further comments, Attorney Gill.
Do you have any other questions, Attorney Gill?
No, Judge.
All right, then thank you for your testimony, Ms. Ryzen. As you've heard, we've got more witnesses coming tomorrow. So I would ask all of the people that have been present today to not discuss your testimony with the witnesses who are still going to come in and testify tomorrow. Once the hearing is done, you're welcome to talk about whatever you want, but I would ask that at least the witnesses that testified today don't talk to, at least disclose what they testified about today to the witnesses that are still going to testify tomorrow.
Agreed.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So then I guess we're ending for today, and then we'll start back up tomorrow morning with the remainder of the respondents' witnesses. Is 9:30 still a good start time for everybody for tomorrow?
We could start even earlier if you want it, Judge. We're fine with whatever works for you.
What about you, Ms. Harris? Would you want to start before 9:30?
I am unable to start before 9:30.
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll keep it at 9:30 tomorrow then. You can use the same link that you used to connect today to join tomorrow. And I will see everybody then at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Judge.
All right, thank you everybody for your time and testimony today.